The spreadsheet felt like the only clean thing left in the world. On the glowing screen of my laptop, the columns stood in perfect formation, the numbers aligned to the decimal point. It was late. The house was quiet except for the low, steady hum of the refrigerator, a sound I usually found soothing. But tonight, it felt like a drone counting down to something I didn't have a name for yet. My name is Naima, and for 7 years, I had been the bookkeeper of my husband's life, a job whose title I had only just begun to understand. The dining room table, a dark, heavy wood Maurice had picked out, was my office. It was covered in the detritus of his business, a shoebox of gas receipts, crumpled invoices from lumber yards, hastily scribbled timesheets from his crew. My job was to turn this chaos into order, to balance the ledger. My finger, tracing the lines of the Q3 payroll report, stopped. It was a physical stop, a sudden arrest of motion. My nail was pressed against a name that did not belong. Doreen M. Preston, consultant. A consulting fee of $1,200 had been paid out on the 15th of September, and August, and July. I scrolled back, my heart beginning a slow, heavy beat against my ribs. 18 months. A monthly withdrawal, disguised as work, paid to my mother-in-law from the business account I managed. The business I had helped build from a man with a truck and a dream into a bonded, insured LLC with a waiting list of clients. There was no corresponding invoice from Doreen, no scope of work, no deliverable logged. It was just a name in a column, a ghost in the machine of our finances. And in the silent humming house, that ghost began to feel more solid than my own reflection in the dark screen. The books, for the first time in my tenure, were perfectly balanced and utterly wrong. My name is Naima. I am 33 years old. Maurice, my husband, was 38. We had been married for 7 years, together for 9, building a life in a quiet suburb of Charlotte, where the oak trees were older than the houses, long enough that the foundations should have been settled. I am a bookkeeper by trade and by temperament. I believe in order, in systems, in the quiet, immutable truth of mathematics. A number is either correct or it is not. A ledger is either balanced or it is broken. I see the world as a series of accounts, emotional, financial, relational. For a relationship to be solvent, the deposits must, over time, equal or exceed the withdrawals. There can be seasons of deficit, of course, illness, ambition, grief. But it must eventually balance. For years, I had been meticulously balancing the books for Maurice's contracting firm, Preston Homes LLC. It had never occurred to me, until that moment with my finger pressed against the screen, to run a full accounting of my own. The sentence that broke the seal on that account wasn't spoken in anger. It was delivered like a joke, a casual aside at a summer barbecue, the smell of charcoal and cut grass thick in the air. We were with his crew and their families. One of the newer guys, his wife a sweet woman named Keisha, asked me what I did for a living. Before I could answer, Maurice, a bottle of beer in his hand and a broad smile on his face, draped an arm over my shoulder. He was performing, holding court as the benevolent boss, the successful business owner. "This one right here," he said, giving me a squeeze. "She keeps the whole ship afloat." Keisha smiled, impressed. "So you're like his business partner?" she asked. Maurice laughed, a deep rumbling sound that used to make me feel safe. "She's not my wife on paper for the company," he said, his voice carrying over the music and laughter. "She's just the help I sleep next to." The men around him chuckled. A few of their wives offered tight, sympathetic smiles. I felt the weight of his arm on my shoulders turn from an embrace into a yoke. The air, thick with the smell of summer, suddenly felt thin in my lungs. He said it so easily. He had reduced me in one casual sentence to a function. 2 functions, to be precise: labor and access. He had neatly separated the wife from the work, erasing the reality that I was both, and that the work was an act of love. Or at least, it had started as one. In that moment, I saw it clearly. He didn't see a partner who was also his wife. He saw an employee he didn't have to pay market rate. The worst part was the silence that followed in my own head. There was no explosion of anger, no surge of tears. There was just a quiet, cold click. The sound of a file being closed. The sound of an entry being made in a ledger that had been neglected for far too long. It began so innocently. When we were first married, Maurice was a subcontractor getting paid by the job. He was brilliant with his hands, could see the bones of a house and know exactly how to make it stronger, more beautiful. But paperwork was his enemy. Invoices were written on napkins, receipts were lost. Taxes were a looming terror he ignored until the last possible second. I, with my neat mind and love for spreadsheets, stepped in to help. "Just for a little while," we said, "until you can afford to hire someone." I built his systems from scratch. I created invoice templates, set up QuickBooks, designed a spreadsheet to track mileage and expenses. On Tuesday nights, the dining room table became my domain. I would sit for hours under the warm glow of the overhead light, a cup of chamomile tea beside me, and I would reconstruct his work week from a shoebox of crumpled papers and a series of disjointed texts from his crew. "Yo, we finished the framing at the Henderson job. Used my card for the extra drywall." I was a financial archaeologist, digging through the ruins of his week and creating a clean, coherent story. In the next room, the blue light of the television would flicker. I could hear the canned laughter of a sitcom or the dramatic score of a police procedural. He would be on the couch, feet up, unwinding from a day of physical labor. I understood that. His work was hard on his body, but my work, the quiet, meticulous labor of the mind, was invisible to him. It was just what I did. "Just handle the invoices, baby," he'd say, walking through the dining room on his way to get a snack from the kitchen. "You know how I am with that stuff." It was presented as a charming flaw, a quirk of the brilliant artist who couldn't be bothered with the mundane. I accepted it as my role. I was the sturdy scaffolding that allowed his beautiful building to rise. I didn't realize that scaffolding is, by definition, temporary. And it is always, eventually, taken down. The little while became 7 years. The man with a truck became an LLC with a crew of 5. The shoebox became a steady stream of revenue. And I became his unpaid business manager. My $58,000 salary was for my bookkeeping, a line item in his budget. But the rest of it, the client management, the vendor negotiations, the scheduling, the license renewals, that was off the books. That was the wife stuff. I remember a time, maybe 4 years in, when he landed his biggest contract to date, a full kitchen and bath remodel for a wealthy couple in Myers Park. The profit margin was significant. He was ecstatic. He came home, lifted me off my feet, and spun me around the kitchen. "We did it, baby!" he shouted. "We did it!" He popped a bottle of champagne we'd been saving and poured 2 glasses. He raised his. "To Naima," he said, his eyes shining, "for making everything so easy." I glowed. I felt seen, valued, a partner. Now, I hear those words and they curdle in my memory. He wasn't toasting a partner. He was toasting an appliance, a smooth-running machine that made his life easier. It was a customer review, not a love letter. The ease he was celebrating was purchased with my exhaustion. His mother, Doreen, was the architect of his perspective. She was a woman who believed in a strict and traditional division of roles, a blueprint she passed down to her son with unwavering conviction. I saw it most clearly one Sunday afternoon in her kitchen. The air was fragrant with roasting chicken and collard greens. I was helping her shell peas while Maurice and his father watched football in the living room, their shouts occasionally punctuating the quiet rhythm of the kitchen. Doreen was snapping green beans into a metal bowl, the sound a sharp, percussive counterpoint to my softer work. She didn't look up from her task when she spoke. "A man stays the man because his wife lets him," she said, her voice low and certain. "He needs to feel like the head of his house, even when you're the neck turning it. Don't you go making him feel small with all your numbers and your spreadsheets. That's your job behind the scenes. His job is out front. Don't forget your job, Naima." I looked over at her hands, strong and capable, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of decades of practice. She still hadn't looked at me. She was delivering a sermon to the green beans. I glanced through the doorway into the living room. Maurice was laughing at something on the screen, completely oblivious to the doctrine being preached on his behalf. He just nodded when she spoke, absorbed her philosophy like a sponge. Later, when he would parrot her words back to me, he wouldn't even realize they weren't his own. The first time it happened, we were arguing about cash flow. A major client was late on a payment, and it was putting a strain on our ability to make payroll for the crew. I had laid out a plan on a spreadsheet, a temporary draw from our personal savings to cover the gap, with a clear repayment schedule. It was a practical, unemotional solution to a common business problem. He hated it. He saw it as a personal failure, a judgment on his ability to provide. "I don't need to see all that," he said, pushing the laptop away. "Just figure it out. Maurice, this is figuring it out. We need to be on the same page about this." He sighed, a deep put-upon sound. He ran a hand over his face. "Mama said a wife shouldn't make her husband feel small with numbers," he said, his voice quiet. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the wall, as if consulting an invisible script. I stared at him. The echo was so clear, it was as if Doreen were standing in the room between us. He wasn't having a conversation with me. He was reciting a line he had been taught. He was using his mother's voice to silence his wife's. It was the first time I realized his authority wasn't his own. It was borrowed, and the collateral was my competence. For him to feel big, I had to be made small. My spreadsheets weren't tools for our shared success. They were threats to his authority. The erosion was a slow, steady process, like water wearing away stone. It happened in 1,000 tiny moments that, alone, seemed insignificant. Every March, without fail, his general contractor's license was up for renewal. And every March, it was I who managed it. I was the one who remembered the deadline, who filled out the multi-page application, who gathered the proof of insurance and the continuing education certificates. I was the one who drove downtown to the county building on my lunch break, stood in line at the clerk's office, and paid the $300 fee from our joint account. I would bring the newly stamped certificate home, and Maurice would take it from me with a satisfied nod. "Good, good. Got that handled," he'd say, as if he had accomplished something. He would then hang it in a prominent place in his home office, a testament to his professionalism. He'd point to it when new clients came to the house for meetings. "As you can see," he'd say with a sweep of his hand, "I stay on top of all my compliance." He said I. He never said we. He never said, "My wife Naima, who runs the entire administrative side of my company, handled it." My labor was rendered completely invisible, absorbed into his persona as the competent, on-the-ball business owner. I was the ghostwriter of his success. It wasn't just the big things. It was the constant, grinding maintenance. It was me calling a client who was 30 days past due and using a firm but friendly tone to coax a check out of them, sparing him the discomfort of the confrontation. It was me spending hours on the phone with the insurance company, arguing over a denied claim for a piece of stolen equipment. It was me building the company website on a Sunday afternoon, teaching myself basic HTML because he didn't want to pay a professional. It was me mediating disputes between his crew members over hours and pay, translating their frustrated texts into accurate payroll entries. I was the buffer between Morris and every single unpleasant, unglamorous aspect of running a business. I absorbed all the friction so he could have a smooth ride, and he had gotten so used to the smoothness, he had forgotten I was the reason for it. He didn't see the engine, he just enjoyed the speed. That night, staring at Doreen's name on my screen, all of those moments came rushing back. They arranged themselves into a new pattern. The casual requests, the borrowed opinions, the erased labor. It wasn't a series of isolated incidents. It was a system. A system designed to run on my uncompensated, unacknowledged work. The 18 months of payments to his mother weren't just a financial discrepancy. They were the clearest evidence of the system in action. He was taking the profits generated by my labor and secretly funneling them to the woman who taught him how to exploit it. It was a perfect, closed loop of disrespect. I managed the accounts, which created the profit, which he used to pay his mother for consulting, the content of which was, undoubtedly, advice on how to keep me in my place. The sheer, elegant corruption of it was breathtaking. He had used my own meticulous system of order to hide his betrayal. The anger I expected to feel never came. Instead, a profound and unnerving calm settled over me. It was the feeling I got when a complex reconciliation finally clicked into place, when the last number found its home and the balance sheet read 0. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. The cold, clean, and absolute clarity of a final audit. The business of this marriage was insolvent. The emotional debt was too high, the assets devalued. It was time to liquidate. The decision arrived fully formed, without debate or hesitation. I wasn't leaving my husband. I was closing a defunct account. For the next 3 days, I was the perfect wife. I was a ghost haunting the form of my old life. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I sat beside him on the couch and feigned interest in the television shows he watched. But inside, I was already gone. I was a flurry of silent, methodical activity. While he was at work, I began the quiet process of extraction. I bought a 1 terabyte external hard drive. On Wednesday afternoon, while he was on a job site across town, I sat at the dining room table and initiated the backup. The entire QuickBooks file. 7 years of invoices, client lists, vendor accounts, payment histories, tax records. The financial soul of his company. The progress bar on the screen moved with excruciating slowness. Every car that passed on the street outside made my heart leap, convinced it was him coming home early. The house was too quiet. I could hear the click and whir of the hard drive, a sound as loud as a scream. It was the sound of my life being copied and pasted. While the files transferred, I worked on my laptop, opening browser tabs he would never think to check. Apartment listings in a neighborhood on the other side of town. Moving company quotes. A checklist for changing my legal address. My work as a bookkeeper had made me an excellent planner. I approached my departure like a project, with timelines, deliverables, and a budget. The emotional component was filed away under miscellaneous, to be dealt with at a later date. Thursday night was the hardest. He came home smelling of sawdust and sweat, tired but happy. A difficult client had finally signed off on a project, releasing the final substantial payment. "That's a win for us, baby," he said, dropping a kiss on the top of my head as I stood at the stove, stirring a pot of pasta sauce. The sauce bubbled, thick and red. He wrapped his arms around my waist from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "I was thinking," he murmured, his voice warm against my ear. "Maybe we should take that trip to Asheville we talked about. A long weekend. Just us." For a terrifying second, my resolve wavered. The warmth of his body, the familiar weight of his arms, the promise of a future that was, just days ago, my most cherished dream. It was a ghost limb, aching with a memory of feeling. But then I saw Doreen's name on the spreadsheet in my mind's eye. I saw his laughing face at the barbecue, the help I sleep next to. The warmth of his embrace turned clinical, the pressure of an object I was cataloging for removal. "That sounds nice," I said, my voice even. I kept stirring the sauce. "Let's talk about it this weekend." He squeezed me. "See? I knew you'd be up for it. You work so hard. You deserve a break." The irony was a physical thing, a bitter taste in the back of my throat. He was offering me a vacation from the job he didn't even know he was about to lose. He had no idea I was in the final stages of planning a permanent one. He ate dinner with gusto, praising my cooking, talking about plans for the business, plans for us. I listened, I nodded, I smiled. I was an actress in the final performance of a play I had come to despise. I felt like a spy in my own home, my composure a form of camouflage. Friday, he left early for a job an hour away. He wouldn't be back until late. The day was mine. The moving van I had hired was a discreet, unmarked panel van. Two quiet, efficient men helped me pack my clothes, my books, my personal computer, the few pieces of furniture that were mine before the marriage. They worked quickly, their professionalism a comfort. They created no drama, asked no questions. They were simply executing a task. The house felt cavernous as they emptied my life from it. The closet was half empty, a landscape of vacant hangers. The bookshelf had gaping holes where my favorites used to be. My side of the bathroom vanity was wiped clean, sterile as a hotel. I walked through the rooms one last time. I felt a pang of grief, not for the man, but for the dream of the life I thought I was building here. It was the feeling of writing off a bad debt. You accept the loss, you adjust the books, and you move on. But you never forget the cost. My last act was to tidy up. I wiped down the counters. I put his laptop, which was company property, squarely in the middle of his desk in the office. And on the dining room table, my former office, I placed the master company binder. It was a thick 3-ring binder, navy blue. Inside was every essential document for his business, organized and protected in clear plastic sleeves. The business license, the proof of insurance, the tax ID forms, the vendor contracts, all meticulously tabbed and labeled in my neat, clear handwriting. It was the physical manifestation of my 7 years of invisible labor. It was a monument to the order I had created. And now, it was an anchor. It was the only thing connecting him to the information he needed to run his own company. I had taken the key. The digital key was on the hard drive in my purse. I left my wedding rings on top of the binder, a small circle of gold and diamonds on the dark blue plastic. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was an accounting correction. They were assets that no longer belonged on my balance sheet. I closed the front door behind me, the click of the lock soft but final. The air outside was cool and clean. The temperature of my heart was ledger clean, unsentimental, balanced. I did not look back. The first text arrived at 7:42 p.m. "Hey, you home?" I was in my new apartment, a small one-bedroom with large windows overlooking a street I didn't know. The walls were bare, the boxes were stacked, but it was quiet. It was mine. I looked at the text and put my phone on the counter, screen down. The calls started an hour later. First one, then another, then a rapid series of 3. I let them all go to voicemail. I sat on the floor, ate a sandwich I'd bought from a deli, and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of a new building. The silence from my phone felt louder than the ringing had. Finally, a voicemail notification popped up. I listened, my finger hovering over the delete button. It was him. His voice was tight with confusion and a rising tide of irritation. "Naima, where the hell are you? The closet's half empty. What is going on? Call me. This isn't funny." Another one came 10 minutes later. The confusion had curdled into anger. "All right. I don't know what kind of dramatic game you're playing, but I've got payroll to run on Monday. I need you here. Whatever this is, you're being completely childish. Call me back, now." He thought my absence was a tactic, a negotiation. He couldn't conceive of it as a final decision. He saw me as a malfunctioning part of his business, not as a person who had left it. The next day, Saturday, the calls started coming from an unknown number. I let it ring. A voicemail appeared. It was Doreen. Her voice was a syrupy blend of condescension and concern. "Naima, dear, it's Doreen. I just spoke with Maurice. He's worried sick. Whatever little spat you two have had, it's gone on long enough. You don't just walk out on your husband. A marriage is a commitment. Now, you be a good wife and you call your man. He needs you." She called me a good wife. The same woman who accepted $1,200 a month from a secret consulting fee that my labor paid for. I typed out a text to her. "Thank you for your concern, Doreen. This is a private matter between Morris and me." I blocked her number. The real confrontation came on Sunday afternoon. He showed up at my sister's house, assuming I would have gone there. My sister, bless her heart, met him on the porch. I had already called her and told her everything. She was the one person who had seen the erosion happening for years, who had gently tried to warn me. Her only response when I told her I'd left was, "About damn time." He demanded to see me. She told him I wasn't there. He started to yell, his voice cracking with a desperation that was morphing into rage. I wasn't there, but my sister Chloe called me as soon as he left and put her phone on speaker so I could hear her debrief. He was a mess, Nye. A complete wreck. Ranting and raving. "What did he say?" I asked, my voice quiet. At first it was all, "She's being manipulative. She's trying to punish me." Then it changed. He started talking about the business. He said, and get this, he said, "She can't do this to me. I need the financials for the Miller job. The taxes are due." It was all about what he needed. Not once did he say, "I miss my wife." Not once. Then Chloe paused. "There's one more thing," she said, her voice dropping. He said, "You can't run that company without me. It's my name on it." I closed my eyes. There it was. The fundamental, catastrophic misunderstanding of his own life. He thought his name on the LLC paperwork was the source of his power. He thought ownership was control. He had never understood that the real power wasn't in the name on the door. It was in the hands that held the keys. The person who controlled the data, the schedule, the money, that was the person running the company. For 7 years, that person had been me, and he hadn't even noticed. I finally agreed to speak with him on the phone, mostly to arrange the final division of our things. His tone had shifted from anger to a frantic, false remorse. He was sorry, he said. He was an idiot. He never should have said what he said at the barbecue. He would take his mother off the payroll immediately. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Maurice, I said, my voice calm and even. A mistake is a typo. 18 months of secret payments is a choice, a pattern. I can change, he insisted. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything. Please, Naima. I need the QuickBooks file. I can't pay the crew. His desperation laid his motives bare. He wasn't fighting for his wife. He was fighting for his bookkeeper. The negotiation was about access, not intimacy. The business has your name on it, Maurice, I said quietly. You run it. I used his own words, a mirror reflecting his flawed logic back at him. It was a devastatingly simple agreement. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For the first time, I think he started to understand what he had lost. It wasn't just his wife. It was his infrastructure. The final nail was hammered in by Chloe a week later. She had to go back to my old house to pick up a piece of her own mail that had been sent there by mistake. Maurice was there, and so was Doreen. They were in the kitchen, and Chloe overheard them talking as she waited by the door. Maurice was slumped at the table, the picture of defeat. Doreen was, as always, resolute. Let her have her little tantrum, Doreen said, her voice sharp. She'll be back. She'll crawl back. They always do once the lights start cutting off and the rent comes due. She doesn't know how to survive without you. Chloe said Morris just nodded, a flicker of his old arrogance returning to his eyes, fed by his mother's delusion. They still saw me as a dependent. They were looking at a balance sheet from a decade ago, refusing to see the updated reality. They had no idea that I wasn't just surviving. I was incorporating. My new life began in the quiet of my small apartment, with my laptop and a cup of coffee. I didn't have a plan exactly, but I had a skill set, a reputation for being meticulous, and a network of women I had met over the years. I sent out 3 emails. One to a woman from my yoga class who ran a successful catering company. One to a friend of a friend who owned a graphic design studio. One to the woman who did my hair, who had just opened her own salon. The subject line was simple: bookkeeping and business management services. All 3 responded within a day. All 3 hired me. The work was a revelation. My clients were women who, like me, had built something from nothing. They understood the grind. They respected the numbers. When I presented them with a clean profit and loss statement, they saw it not as a judgment, but as a tool. They said thank you. They paid my invoices on time. They valued my advice on cash flow and expansion. I wasn't the invisible help. I was a strategic partner. My little business grew. I was no longer Naima, Maurice's wife who was good with numbers. I was Naima Preston, founder of Balanced Books LLC, a boutique firm specializing in financial management for women-owned small businesses. I was making more money than I ever had, but it wasn't about the income. It was about the validation. It was about the profound satisfaction of using my skills to empower other women, to help them build their own dreams on solid, well-managed foundations. I was no longer just balancing books. I was helping to balance the scales. About 6 months after I left, I saw him. It was a Tuesday morning at a local coffee shop. I was meeting a new client. He was ahead of me in line, ordering a coffee. He looked diminished. It wasn't that he was unwell. He was just ordinary. The larger-than-life charisma he projected had collapsed into a tired, rumpled frustration. His work shirt was wrinkled. There was a smudge of dirt on his cheek. He looked like a man who was trying to do 10 jobs at once and failing at all of them. He turned from the counter and saw me. His face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, hope, shame, and then a familiar flicker of resentment. He walked over to my table. "Naima," he said, his voice husky. "Maurice," I replied, my tone polite, neutral. The tone you use with a former vendor. "You look good," he said. It was an awkward, clumsy opening. "Thank you. I'm doing well." He wrung his hands. "Listen, I know I messed up. I was a fool. But my business, Naima, it's falling apart. I missed a tax deadline. A client is suing me over a billing dispute. I can't make sense of any of it." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I'll pay you. Whatever you want. Just, can you help me fix it? Can I just get a copy of the old files?" I looked at him, at the man I had once loved, the man whose life I had so carefully ordered. And I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no lingering affection. Just the quiet, dispassionate distance of a closed account. He wasn't asking for his wife back. He was trying to rehire his bookkeeper. "Those records were my work product, Maurice," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "My intellectual property. I can't give them to you. You'll have to rebuild, or hire someone new." I saw the last bit of hope drain from his face. He finally understood. The files weren't just data. They were the product of 7 years of my life, my expertise, my care, and they were no longer his to claim. He nodded slowly, turned, and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving his paid-for coffee sitting on the counter. A bookkeeper's job is to create a true and accurate record of what is. It is a profession based on facts, not on feelings or hopes. For 7 years, I kept a perfect set of books for my husband's business, while allowing the ledger of my own life to become a disaster of unrecorded debts and unvalued assets. I was the biggest unlogged expense in my own marriage, an off-the-books liability carrying the entire enterprise. Love doesn't require a spreadsheet to survive, but it does require a sense of reciprocity. It requires that the deposits of respect, care, and acknowledgement roughly equal the withdrawals of support, sacrifice, and forgiveness. When one person is only ever withdrawing and the other is only ever depositing, the system is not a partnership. It is a parasite. My marriage had become an exercise in bad accounting, and my departure was a long overdue market correction. Leaving wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of reconciliation, not with him, but with myself. It was the final, correcting entry in a ledger that had been imbalanced for too long. I didn't close his business. I just stopped holding it open. The consequences were the natural result of his own choices. He didn't lose me. He misplaced me, and I had no interest in being found. The peace I have now is not the peace of a battle won, but the quiet hum of a system in balance. The books are balanced now, and every entry is my own. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.